this point, I'm going to turn it over to, I guess it will be Meredith. We didn't flush this out to review the remote meeting procedures. We have a little swap going on due to the nature of the applications, and I'll let Meredith go right ahead.
All right, give me just a minute. I am going to be sharing my screen, and this is more for people who might be watching via ORCA, but it's going to be some who haven't done a remote meeting with the DRB previously. Oh, hold on one sec. Sorry, I don't usually have. I'm used to doing it all from in there. All righty, can everybody see a PowerPoint?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. So for those of you viewing this meeting via ORCA Media, you can type it into your web browser, and that will take you right into the Zoom meeting. You'll be able to see the screens we look at. You'll be able to ask questions, give time.
How do you vote? I vote yes. And Michael?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Bobby? Thank you, Gene. And Rob, myself, votes yes. That is approved unanimously. At this time, we will now move on to approval of the minutes for the January 18th, 2022 meeting. I will accept a motion or amendments as members wish to proceed.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Gene.
Second.
I think that was a second by Catherine.
Right.
Alrighty, so Kevin, how do you vote?
I was not present.
Yes.
And Gene?
Yes.
And Rob, myself, votes yes. That is unanimously approved. Step right up here if you feel comfortable. I'm assuming you would like to speak tonight on this application.
Well, I thought we were going to do it a little differently, but
Okay.
okay. Do you want me to?
If you can, well, I guess I will introduce this item of the agenda. We're moving on to the 25 Cliff Street application.
Recording in progress.
Which is an appeal of an administrative decision of the zoning administrator. And give a little overview of the sort of technical process that we're in here for everybody.
Okay.
And then, you know, you can sort of go through your concerns and say whatever you like to give us information we need to come to a decision here.
Do you want me to do that after Michael?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you just want me to introduce myself?
Yep.
Okay, my name is Susan Danfield Abdo, and I live at 32 Cliff Street. Can everybody hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and I have property adjoining 25 Cliff Street.
Two members of the public that will be providing testimony on this application this evening, and so we will swear both of you in. Dave. Thank you, Meredith. All right. So all those interested in providing testimony on this application, would you please raise your right hand to be sworn in as a witness? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
I do.
Right. Thank you. So we have Meredith, Arthur, and Susan all in as witnesses. So I will now turn it over to Mike for a brief overview of where we're at and how we got here.
All right, so brief overview. One quick point for everybody who's trying to figure out why I'm here and Meredith is not. This is the only time is when we have an appeal, and it's not required under state law to do it this way, but we find it's in the best interest of kind of the public and keeping things above board and fair that when somebody appeals a zoning administrator decision, that the planning director will then be the staff for that appeal. So it will get a whole new review with a whole new set of eyes. So Meredith is the zoning administrator, and she made the decision in this case, and it has been appealed, which is why I'm going to be acting as staff, and Meredith is acting as defendant, if you want, defending her decisions. So this application was from Arthur Folsch of 25 Cliff Street to create a temporary access to the rear of his property for the installation of a solar array, and he applied for that on October 27th. So beginning October 28th, the planning department started to receive some concerns and complaint from Ms. Banfield. Oh, and let me first apologize, Susan. Throughout my staff report, I had her name is Banfield with an N and Banfield with a D, so I've omitted the D. And I now understand your last name is reversed. It should be Banfield Abdo and not Abdo Banfield.
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Okay, I just want to make sure we're proper in how we address you. Ms. Banfield is the neighbor across the street and is a owner of the part owner of the property next adjacent to this. And the planning staff reviewed the concerns at the time and the comments and found none of them would materially impact whether the permit should be issued. And therefore, the permit was issued on October 29th, and that permit had a 15-day appeal window, so appeals would need to be filed by November 14th. On Saturday, November 13th, Ms. Banfield filed a timely appeal of the zoning permit by placing it in the drop box in City Hall. On Monday, November 15th, unaware that the appeal had been filed, Mr. Folsch started his construction, and Ms. Banfield notified Mr. Folsch and the city of the fact that there was an appeal, and we went to the drop box and found said appeal, notified Mr. Folsch to cease construction, which he did, except to stabilize the disturbed area that he had already started construction on and to install silt fencing. On Tuesday, November 16th, Public Works Manager Zach Blodgett inspected the stabilization and confirmed the site had been stabilized for winter. The subject parcel is in residential 9,000, and the Development Review Board first was supposed to hear this on December 20th, and it has been moved to tonight after two movings.
So Susan, do you want to, give a little bit of overview and present however you would like to proceed? The floor is yours.
Well, I think I'd like to begin by saying that I think it's been at least 6 years since Arthur Folsch has spoken to me. I have no idea why. But anyway, that's from the get-go. That just shows you the strain on our relationship. And Arthur sent me an email, and in his email, he said he planned to use the right-of-way to access. He didn't say, I think it was, he said in the a track machine to access the back of his property for a solar array. He said that, and I just can't believe he didn't know that that is not allowed under the contract that he signed when he moved into the property. There are to be no vehicles with motors going up a path. And several emails went back and forth between us because I understand I'm very pro-solar, and several emails went back. And then I became very aware that if I allow this track vehicle to go up a path, that I am setting a precedent. And so I just said no. And that's when Am I not doing something right? And that's when I got wind of a temporary access. And a 13-year-old granddaughter, bless her heart, she found the pictures in my cell phone. But my cell phone wasn't set up, so that's why you got the pictures very late. But this is a very steep bank. And I sent you, I have the pictures here if you need to see them, date, their time, they're stamped, and they're dated to show the steepness of the bank.
These were forwarded to DRB
Okay.
this afternoon, so you have.
These are different pictures than the pictures that I sent from my iPhone because Capital Copy took these pictures with the date and timestamp right off. And I just want to point out that this yellow machine is a city machine, and it's parked right in front of the steep bank. And then as the pictures go on, and their date and their time, their stamp, it shows on November 15th at 7:50 in the morning, I went out to take a picture of the straw or hay bale. I was standing on public property. And that's when I took, these pictures came up with Arthur coming out of his house and coming up very close to me and asking me, why am I taking pictures? And I said, because it's the city's right of way. And at that time, I told him that I have filed an appeal on your project. I said it very clearly. As I walked into my house, Arthur called me a swear word. So I know he heard me because he got more upset. And then I took pictures of the Green Mountain Solar track machine. And I went out a second time when that track machine came over close to the bank. And I said to the Green Mountain Solar person, I said, if any, well, first I should back up. I called the Office of Zoning and Planning, and I left a message with that office, but I got no call back. And then at 8:13, I went and I talked to the Green Mountain Solar hired person, and I said, if any part of this machine touches the ground, I will call the Montpelier police. And these pictures are so important because they show the Green Mountain Solar person getting off the machine. They show him walking back to Arthur's house. And the last one shows Arthur and the Green Mountain Solar person at 8:14 walking up his driveway. So there were 2 times that a neighbor, and I don't care if you just absolutely hate my guts, but when a neighbor says to you, I have filed an appeal, then you have a respectful duty to listen to that person. And I said it twice. And then I went back into the house and I heard machine noise. And I looked out my window, which is right across the street, and I saw the machine trying to grab onto the bank. And so I called the Montpelier police, and I went out and stood in front of the track machine. And I really was beside myself. I didn't know what to do. So that is the beginning of this unfortunate situation.
So you kind of laid out a number of sort of very clear concerns in your appeal here, and so one of our challenges here as the board is we have to sort of take the zoning regulations and like your appeal and we compare them and we see if there's anything we can do to satisfy your concerns and resolve the situation. And so
I can tell you this.
Yeah.
The erosion structure that was set up
Yeah.
did not last 2 days. It was down, and I sent emails to Michael Miller indicating that. And then it was put up, and then it was down 2 days. It's been down since January 18th.
Mhm.
It has done absolutely nothing as far as erosion goes through the winter. Zilch. And when Green Mountain Solar apparently put back the bank, all I saw, I watched them as they put back the bank. And all I watched them do was put all the big roots that they tried to take out, lay them on, put them on the bank, throw some on top, throw some grass seed, and that was it. Oh, throw some hay, some straw or hay, and that was it. And I told Michael Miller, I sent an email, I said, the bank is not put back so that it will not erode through the winter. And so it's eroding, that's for sure. But I won't go out and take more pictures.
If I could, Rob.
Yeah, go ahead,
I have a question for Mike. Mike, where are we in terms of the status of the application and the approval that was granted by Meredith? I mean, what's the issue? I mean, the issue, is it a physical issue in terms of access across land which is governed by a right-of-way, which is I mean, if there's a right-of-way.
Yeah, no, so
I'm
the
confused. I'm
original,
totally
his
confused.
original project, his original proposal was to try to take a less steep route and go through the common, the land that Susan owns beside them, where there's a right-of-way.
So
When he was denied that access to use that right-of-way,
which would have been done by the landowner. That would,
it wouldn't have been his land, it would have been, it's just about 5 or 6 property owners that own the neighboring property, Susan being one of them. It would
okay.
be using their property to make access to his back land. When that was denied, his proposal that is permitted is entirely on his own property. And it is to go up basically a steep slope.
Yes.
You can see from her pictures, and
Right.
Arthur recognizes and has acknowledged that it's a steep slope. DPW and the planning
because
staff
of-
have all said it's above 30%.
It's greater than 30%.
So it is clearly a
So
steep slope.
that's what the allowance is for, is to allow disturbing a 30+ degree slope. It's not a right-of-way issue.
Nope,
It's entirely a slope issue.
it's entirely a slope and erosion issue. And he was looking for, Mr. Folch was looking for a temporary access. So this is a limited time, and we can get into some of the, if we get to conditions and discussions, if we reach that point later
Okay,
on.
so
But it's about a temporary access to get up the steep slope with this tracked equipment so they can install the solar and then drive back down, reseed and restabilize the bank and put up the erosion control. And so that's Arthur's, in a nutshell, that's Arthur's application that was approved.
okay,
go
thank
ahead,
you.
Susan. It's your time.
I own the right of way.
Mhm.
There are 5 families now that have access to the right of way. And Arthur knew when he bought his property about 10 years ago, he knew there would be no access by a vehicle on the right of way because he has the list. And that was not drawn up by me, it was drawn up by another attorney in our neighborhood who has since passed away. So he knew that. That's what really, frankly, irritates me. So because he did not get the access, through the right-of-way. He went to this temporary access. And I have a letter here dated 1996, 97, where I did some improvements on my property. And I had a water problem from the right-of-way because of the improvements. There is a mountain behind and there's lots of ledge. And so I talked to the neighbors because I improved the right-of-way so they would have a good path going up. And I ended up with water. So we had to grade the right-of-way so the water goes towards it's a 6-inch divot, about a 6-inch divot. I'm not going to argue that. It's a little divot that runs along the north part of the turnaround. And so the right-of-way is over here, and we had to grade it, and I had to put plantings in. And I put seed in so that it would slow the water down. Okay, then I had the city come up, and first I went down and I asked him, I said, could you just make that divot a little bit bigger? Because I'm having a water problem with the right-of-way, with the water coming down. And they said, we cannot make the divot any bigger because there's ledge. There is ledge all the way through this area. I mean, you can see a great big ledge rock just to the right side of where Arthur wants to do his temporary access. So I just had to accept the fact that I keep the divot opened so the water will go towards the divot, okay? And then there is a grate, an underground grate. There's actually two. There's the one when you're looking at standing in front of my house and facing Arthur's house, there's one to the right of his driveway, and then there's one to the right of his driveway, and then there's also one to the left of his driveway. This is a number of years ago, Arthur did improvements to his property, and there is a pipe coming out right in front towards the grate when you're looking at his property on the right side. Water comes out of that pipe that Arthur put in all the time. I asked Meredith, where is that water coming from? And she did not know. Now, maybe you can get Arthur to say, because he put the pipe in. But when I was having improvements done to my property, the bulldozer just on the surface nicked an old lead pipe and water came gushing out. And the contractor said, that water is coming from across the street. And I don't know why they didn't cap it off. So the professionals put what they call a crimp in the pipe. And it's right on the surface. It's not very deep, but it's under the crawl space of my house. And the way they acted, it was coming from that property, okay, 25 Cliff Street. So I am very concerned about water.
Okay.
I'm very concerned about water, and I'm very concerned about erosion.
Okay.
And I'm very concerned about ledge. We couldn't even make the divot any bigger because of the ledge. And there is ledge throughout.
Yeah.
So I know that I could go after Arthur if he does this temporary access and makes a problem for me.
Neighbor situation.
Yeah, and I think that the next step going forward, we obviously usually hear from the applicant, but there's not necessarily an applicant here. There's an appellant.
There's an appellant, but not an applicant.
Sort of like an
That's
overview
right.
of the project
Yeah.
and what they're planning to do to address erosion and address any that type of stuff.
I just want to add one
Yeah.
thing. These stumps that you see, there's two sets of stumps in the picture.
Yeah.
The city graciously took down some ash trees that were really threatening my house. That's how close my house is. it's about 10 feet from the pavement.
Right.
And so Alex, who is the tree arborist, said he would plant some lilacs or something on the bank when he took them down. That was just a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
And so there's been nothing really planted on there, but the bank has been holding.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Absolutely. So, Arthur, do you wish to provide a little review of your project for the board, so we can just sort of weigh all the information here?
Sure. Just to start with a couple of clarifications. So first of all, I am one of the landowners who abuts my own property. So I am also in it. And clearly this is a contentious issue. Susan's description does not fit mine in terms of how that property works or is agreed to, but that's not for this hearing to decide. It does happen to be context as to why Nicole, my partner, and I decided that we would try to put in a temporary access because we have a solar project which we've been working on for some time, and we were at a point where we have a permit now from the state and we want to put the panels up. We need to get a machine in that can drill screws into the ground. To do that, they need the track machine to get up. So it's not ideal for us either. We recognize this is a steep bank. This is not our preferred route, but this is where we are. So we're trying to figure out how to do it in the best way possible. So obviously we approached the city because we knew it's in the city's interest to safeguard both the right of way and the steep slope. And we believe that we came up with a proposal that satisfies us getting a track machine, both an excavator and a skid steer, up that bank, put the screws in for the array, and get those machines out and tend to the bank so that it will be stable and it will grow. We have, we talked about plantings and so on and so forth. And I don't really want to hash out the details of why our neighborhood is so acrimonious, but I think it's worth noting that when Susan finished her last statement about the stumps that were left on the bank, that's my property. She directed the city to cut trees on my property and then proceeded to burn those trees for firewood. So, the sense of entitlement and ownership of Nicole and my land by Susan in this case is very difficult for us. We don't want to have conflict around this. We'd really like to just get the solar panels up, but we're being put into a position where we're making a suboptimal choice. We believe we're making one that's reasoned. And we believe we're making one that will work and will protect all the stakeholders who are involved. But at the end of the day, it's not how we'd like to do it. I'm happy to clarify any of the other points around this, but I think the permit is, I hope, fairly straightforward. We want to build a very narrow path going up a steep bank that's going sort of perpendicular to the bank itself that curves into our backyard. We're at the end of Cliff Street. There's steep banks all around us, but once we're over that initial bank, which is about 12 feet plus or minus, depending on where you stand in the cul-de-sac to see it, after that, it's a reasonable path into our backyard. So again, it's not the best approach, but it does seem viable, and that's what we're doing at this point. That's our plan to be able to make the solar panel project work. Thanks.
To clarify real quick, when you say temporary access, what's the timing and duration of that proposal?
So Green Mountain Solar and their subcontractor, which is Flynn Hill Contracting, they told us they need about 48 hours to actually do that work. So the intention really is we need to drive a machine up, put the screws in, and drive it back and repair it. And that looks like something on the order of 2 days. But I think we all know in our experience of various construction projects, 2 days never is 2 days. It probably ends up being more than that. But they don't believe, they're not seeing traffic going up and down. They're just seeing like the time it takes to create it, the time it takes to install, and then to get out. And again, they are saying that's like 48 hours.
And is this work that can be done in the winter, or they need to wait till spring to do this?
This is not work we would entertain in winter. I mean, even though, like that bank seems to be fairly dry, we would want to give it time for all the water to melt out from it. So we want to make sure that it is, that it is reasonable, that we're not going to cause undue, problems for ourselves trying to go through mud and whatnot.
Yes, Susan,
I
real
would
quick.
just like to say something. I have a deed to my property. And when Arthur confronts that issue, he is barking up a tree that he does not have a deed.
And I don't, I'm sorry, Susan, I don't want to cut you off here, but unfortunately, this board, we can't.
I know, but I'm just
we can-
saying that,
Yeah.
and I am not in the position, I never will be, and he needs to understand this. I will never give my property away. I pay taxes on that property, and I will never give it away. And he can be as contentious as he wants, but he's never going to make me move. And the people that take over my house will not move either. Okay, that being said, something that is new, that is appropriate for me to say to this board, is that I have been in touch with the Public Utilities Department and the Public Utilities Commission. And they are not happy. They are not happy because I wasn't informed about this project, and it was approved last August. And there is no way I could make my issues clear because I was not informed. And so this hearing may be all for naught if Arthur's solar array, which unfortunately the kind he wants, is revoked. And those are the words they used. And one person asked me, well, why doesn't he just put a solar array on top of his house? And I said, I don't know. And so I'm bringing that up because there are other options besides tearing down a bank. And I've been told by Meredith Crandall that the bank will never be the same. And here we have a little divot that's directing the water. And, it's just something I think that we can look into.
So let me ask you, if you had not to say that the board would require this because we have some procedural stuff, to talk about, here. We have a process where if you're disturbing steep slopes, you have to have a plan prepared by a professional engineer to make sure that the drainage is okay. If you were to go through that process, would that satisfy the majority of your concerns?
Well, I think it would go a long way if the person could say where the water's coming from.
Okay.
That came gushing out of, the pipe that's underneath my house. All they could tell me is that it's across the street. And so I have the knowledge that there are several springs across the street. And all of them bring water down. My house was built in 1880.
Yeah.
And it's still standing. Amazingly, it's been built into the cliff and it's still standing. It's the only house that's, it's all by itself.
Yeah. So you would like some answers on to where the water is going exactly?
Boy, I tell you, I would love some answers.
Okay.
I didn't pursue it when that pipe was nicked.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't really any reason for me to pursue it. I've lived in that house for 35 years. This issue has never come up. And I would never expect it to come up because the reason I wanted to have a site visit is that, frankly, anybody looking at the site, I would think that they could say, oh my goodness, this is going to cause big time erosion. And the other thing is, based on these pictures, I cannot trust this neighbor. I do not, frankly, he scares me. And so I don't know if what he's going to do, if he's allowed a temporary access, if that's going to set a precedent for future access. And then I'm the one that's going to have to deal with it. So,
Okay. So I kind of want to just move over to change gears a little bit here to start kind of digging through the regs and some of these issues. The staff report, sort of first big issue that we point to is this question about steep slopes and whether the provisions were applied correctly thus far on this application. On page 4 of the staff report here, and I think was previously said, it doesn't appear to be any disagreement here about how the slopes maps for the city, which the city's zoning regulations direct you to use, that this area in question is an area with 30% slopes or greater, but Mike, do you want to maybe expand a little bit upon where we are as far as steep slopes and what the decision was made on the administrative level related to steep slopes?
Okay, so what happened during the zoning permit process was that Meredith had the application. She noted, as Arthur noted, that it was a steep slope. She reviewed this with Zach Blodgett, who is a licensed engineer, works for Public Works, and talked to him about this proposal being, this narrow, going up the steep slope with the tracked equipment, and he felt that this was going to be okay, provided it was had the proper erosion control. Because it was going to be temporary, because it was going to be of limited scope, they're just going to be roughing out a path. That was going to be fine. So under the regulations, Meredith has a right to determination that, based on her conversations with Zach Blodgett, that this is going to be temporary, it's going to be of limited scope, that a full engineering report would not be needed. The second piece, we're kind of splitting hairs a little bit on these things here. There is also a requirement to have a hearing, and that's where I noted in the staff report that I think although Zach has agreed that this doesn't need a hearing, that this doesn't need an engineer's report, it probably, in my opinion, should have had a hearing because it was going to disturb 30% slopes. We don't have a hearing requirement. Tonight, we are having a hearing, so therefore, it is certainly the option of the DRB to go through and say, this is the hearing, this is the opportunity to comment and make a decision as a board. So that's a little bit of the subtleties. You could, as a board, say you want to have a separate engineering report produced, basically making a different decision than Meredith. You also could say we want to have a new warned public hearing with that new engineering report. So the board has some options with respect to this, and it's up to you, I guess, what path you'd want to take. If you want to just make this the hearing, if you want a separate engineer's report, that's up to you at this point.
Well, I guess I have one more question. So you have the threshold for the 30%.
Yes.
Is there a square footage as it relates to the amount of area disturbed that falls into this, or not in our regulations?
No, the regulations unfortunately just say any disturbance of soil over 30%. And Meredith, because a little bit of this application and some others, we thought maybe we'll talk to the Planning Commission and some others about whether there should be a low threshold that would say the minimal disturbance. But as the regs are written, any disturbance of soil over 30% automatically triggers a hearing. And therefore, even though this is only going to disturb 200 or 300 square feet, I believe was the amount of soil that would be disturbed, it's above zero and therefore technically required a hearing.
So obviously, interesting. Just to put it into context here, obviously you have to draw the line somewhere, because you could go out with your garden shovel and you could dig a wheelbarrow out of the side of the hill and you're just disturbing a 30% slope. But and I know that's not the hair you're trying to pick here, but obviously there's at some point there's a judgment call to say that there's some disturbance of steep slopes that happens in this city, where you don't need an engineered plan, and you don't need a hearing, and so I just
and a little bit of the nature of the disturbances. There wasn't any soil being moved, there wasn't any soil being added. The nature of what they're doing is to kind of shape it. It's being an unshaped piece of soil going up.
Yeah.
What they need to
Mike?
be able to do is just.
Abby, did you lose him there for a minute? Yeah, I saw Abby said that we lost Council Chambers there for a minute. Abby and I were still both sort of live, but maybe step back a minute in what you were saying.
Okay, and where did we lose you?
Pretty much when you put your hands up in the air. I don't know exactly. Sorry.
Well, I think what Mike was saying about there would be no actual disturbance of the soil.
Yes. So so the idea is that there's if there's any disturbance of the soil, then it has to have a hearing, and so that's where we're pretty much where we were at was this should have required a hearing, and now it's up to kind of the board to make a decision on should there be an engineer's report, and does this count as the hearing, or should there be another hearing? There's kind of a couple of decision points for you to make.
Okay. So board members sort of understand where we're at as far as a hearing for steep slopes provision. Does this count as the hearing? We don't have to decide that now, I don't think. But just maybe you make sure you have enough information to make that decision later. Kevin, yes?
Yeah. Rob, I have a question. I was curious to know more about Mike's comment that it wouldn't disturb the soil. Is that because the equipment is just intended to, how does that work? That it wouldn't disturb the soil?
Disturb the soil. So they were bringing in an excavator to shape, so they weren't going to bring in any soil, and they weren't removing any soil. But what they did need to do is my understanding, and maybe Arthur can correct me if I'm wrong, just to kind of, move some stumps, move some soil, move some rocks, but you're kind of moving things a little bit to make a clearer path, so that way the tracked equipment can drive in and drive out. It's not making a road, it's not installing, it's just in order to get the tracked equipment to go up, you kind of gotta, it'll be uneven, and you're just gonna kind of move some dirt, so that way it makes a kind of a straighter, flatter path for the tracked equipment to work its way in and out.
Does it have to be graded? Does the slope have to be graded at all?
Maybe that's a little bit of a technical question for Arthur. I believe it's not
Okay.
graded, it's just being shaped in order to allow the equipment to.
That's my understanding as well. I'm not the excavator operator. So I can't, specify it in that level of technicality. Perhaps what I was told as we walked through it, he indicated where he'd pull soil from one spot and create kind of a bench for the vehicles to go up. We're talking about a 6-foot wide path that would be going sort of diagonally up the path. And then, to ensure like we would, wherever there are divots from that moving of soil, that would probably be smoothed out. I don't know if that counts as grading or not, but that the intent there is just to make it disappear into the bank after it's been used, and two, be as least intrusive as possible.
Thanks.
No. Go ahead, Abby.
That was it.
Thank you. Kevin, do you have anything?
Yeah, I just I recommend that we take all evidence possible and then adjourn to deliberative session.
Okay.
This is definitely a deliberative session
I
matter.
was just going to say, I feel like I've got the information I need for us to sort of hammer out the technical regulatory details of how all of this sort of interacts with the zoning ordinance. And so
I just want to add one other thing.
Yep.
In Arthur's application, he said the divot will not be disturbed. It is impossible to create a bench and not disturb the divot. That is an impossible activity. So when you're deliberating, I want you to think about water coming down on both sides, and we know water's coming down on the right side 24/7. I don't know where it's coming from. Water's coming from underneath my house, and water is coming down the right of way until it was pushed into the divot. And it makes me very, very concerned. Very concerned. So concerned that I've notified my home insurance company about this situation. And they were very, very pleased that I notified them. And they told me exactly what to do. Because I know this neighbor, and he will say, well, you have to prove it, that it's the water from my project that's causing you difficulty. And so I have worked to get the proof together beforehand and then after. And I really just don't want to go through that, but my home insurance said, you're doing the right thing. And it's very unfortunate because Mr. Fulch has lived there for about, I would say, you could ask him, 10 years. And he did a great big project, building a retaining wall behind his house. Well, if he hadn't built that retaining wall, he could have pulled up. There's plenty of room for access, but he put in a big retaining wall. So I am dealing with a neighbor that doesn't plan, and I'm not going to be the scapegoat for his lack of planning. That's where we're at. And the other thing is that the neighbor on the other side of Arthur
I think we really have
put
to
up a
keep
solar
be
array
on point with these.
Yep.
and did not need a fax machine. So
And I think
All right.
Gene has a question too.
Yeah, before we go into deliberative, just because I'm been looking at this site in detail with the Google map. So someone raised the question on whether was there any other alternatives as far as putting the solar on the roof, or beyond 25 Cliff Street, is there any other point of access that wouldn't be as steep or as disturbing to access the rear of the property?
Gene, I think those are interesting questions, but I also think that there might be outside of sort of the purview and the reasons why we're here. And so I would thank everyone for their participation this evening on this matter. And
So I did want to, before we
Yep.
move out, there's a second point. So there were two points, which one you noted on page 4 about the steep slopes, and the second is on page 7 regarding erosion control. They're both very related issues, but they're technically two separate issues. So I just wanted to make sure that we, on the record, we mentioned that the second one is whether or not there should be an licensed engineer in Vermont, and he reviewed the erosion control plans, and he's continued to monitor the plans and is aware of the fact that the snowplow has taken out that silt fence, and they're in touch with Arthur and said there's no sense putting the fence back up until the snow starts to melt, because the ground underneath is currently frozen and isn't going anywhere. And putting up the silt fence now in the snowbanks is just going to get taken out, and it's not serving any purpose. So the Public Works will continue to be in touch with Arthur over the winter to continue to monitor it and make recommendations on that.
I have to disagree.
Okay.
The erosion structure was down
Yeah.
before the snow came. That I'm clear about. It had nothing to do with the snow. The erosion structure was not built to withstand this steep bank. And then the snowplow, yes, took it out, because you would just expect that to happen. So,
Alrighty. I would entertain a motion for the board to move on unless any board member feels like they need any more information or have any more questions.
Gene still have his hand up, or does Gene
In which
have
case,
another?
No, I'm sorry, I gotta get that hand down. I'd like to motion to go into deliberate session.
But we will be doing.
We'll do that after Fred.
close the public hearing and then go into deliberative session.
Right, Gene, do you accept that friendly amendment for your motion that we will close the public hearing and we'll go to the deliberative session at the end of tonight's regular meeting?
That would be my amended motion.
You okay with that, Gene?
Yes, second, or to the amended.
Gene, we still need a second.
That'll be me.
And Kevin, second from Kevin. Okay, Kevin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Joe? Abby?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
Yes.
Joe there, or is Joe at?
What else, Joe?
Oh, there he is.
Joe, we can't seem to hear you. Still can't hear you.
We have enough votes. We'll
Can we get a thumbs up?
thumbs up from Joe.
We can see you if you want to do a thumbs up if it's a yes. Okay.
No. Do this thing?
Joe and
There he is.
Rob, that motion to take this up in deliberative session, close the public hearing now, approved unanimously. So we will be discussing this after tonight's meeting. You will be hearing from the planning department at some point in the coming weeks. Specifics on the process for the appellate.
No, this will be, if a decision is rendered tonight, I'll be starting to work on the writing up the decision, and Rob, we'll get with Rob to get that signed, and we'll get that out to the applicant and the appellant. As appeals are work the same way as any DRB decision, there's a 30-day appeal window on these. So once this decision is signed, it'll be 30 days, and either appealed or the permit will be valid or denied.
So, Susan, thank you very much for coming in this evening. And
thank you.
we wish you the best with the rest of this. Board members, I would entertain a motion for a 5-minute recess as we have to shuffle staff around here in between applications.
So,
We'll just do that.
yeah, you know,
But log us back in here.
All right.
Ready, welcome back. I believe we have everybody present here.
I don't know. I don't know if Abby and I don't know if our actual board members are
Yeah,
back.
I'm just checking.
Yeah.
Okay, Jean's here. Abby's here.
Catherine, are you back?
Michael's here. He just unmuted himself.
Yeah, I'm here.
Awesome. Joe's back.
Not Catherine, though.
Just got to wait for Catherine.
I'm here.
Awesome.
We're all set.
And there's a bunch of people to swear in this time around.
Yeah. So it is now past 8:10. We're going to call this meeting back to order. Thank you all for being patient while we had a little recess. So our next application this evening is for a conditional use approval on Granite Shed Lane in Montpelier. And anyone who is here to speak on this application?
Fred,
So Jeff Valesky.
the civil engineer for the project.
And so Meredith, do you want to give a brief overview of the status of where we're at on this application?
Yep. So the staff report goes into some of the history for the project. I think I might let Fred or Jeff talk about most of the history. In general, as Rob started to say, this is a application for major site plan review and conditional use approval. Tied in with that is also a request for some permitted uses that normally would just be administrative approvals, but they're all part of the review for the major site plan and what is planned to be done for the, evaluate those based on the uses. So everything is included in this approval package. That doesn't mean that the board has to approve all of those parts, right? So they could approve the major site plan request along with the permitted uses being requested, and then decide how they want to deal with the conditional uses. There's a mix of things that the board could do here. As summarized in the staff report, there is some administrative permit history with this project, because this is all part of a brownfield redevelopment project. There's a corrective action plan. And so we've had back and forths with the applicant on various small parts of the project that had to get dealt with so that they could clean up the underlying site, as well as some needs, because some of the sort of outbuildings, but really the additions that were put on the building that are the smaller sort of elbows, shoulders to the building, when Connor Brothers bought it, were in really bad disrepair. And so administratively, we have approved some removals of roofs and some small demolition where those demolitions never triggered actual major site plan, and some rebuilding of the shell. With was ready, or Connor Brothers had to come back when they were ready and had a sense of what they were going to actually do with the rest of the site. It wasn't triggering that full review, but we knew it was coming. So that's what we have here. It is still sort of a speculative approval because they don't have a tenant. So that's where some of the complications come into play here, and why there are sections with a lot of red where the board's going to have to figure out whether or not to approve certain items that are mostly tied to the potential uses. And if so, especially with the conditional uses, how to condition them in a way to deal with the things like traffic and other things that come into play when you start having a conditional use. So it's a little bit more of a puzzle piece for the board than I think normally comes before it.
Absolutely. And I think just to note here that there's a number of issues in this application. You could actually say that this could be 3 different applications in one with some different issues. And so I just would like to, ahead of time, just apologize to the applicant and thank you for your patience. We may not get through everything this evening, your preparedness or anything like that. That's just us, going through our process and trying not to make decisions while we're falling asleep. So that being said, we will turn it over to the applicant if you want to give a presentation and overview of what you're proposing to do and try to address any concerns you think you can right off.
Thank you. I'm Fred Connor, and I'm representing the owner, which is Connor Brothers Redevelopment Company, LLC, together with my three brothers, Steve, Mike, and John. And we're joined by our civil engineer, Jeff Oleski, who is the owner of Catamount Consulting Engineers. I'd like to briefly introduce our company and the project, and then turn it over to Jeff to.
We're talking about 43 and what used to be 65 Granite Shed Lane, two old granite warehouses. And the Connors, as Meredith kind of outlined, have periodically pecked off and pulled some of the old rehabilitated portions of the buildings, as well as the entire building that was previously known as 65 Granite Shed Lane, and raised and removed the structures, and are now to a point where they're looking at really getting to the site redevelopment. As you're aware, within the application, and as Meredith outlined, there's no hard tenant at this location right now. Really, Connors are attempting to procure a permit or permits in place so that they can make the lot more marketable for potential clients. And as outlined within the application, there certainly are some preferred and suggested uses, and we'll get into those in some more detail throughout the night, I'm sure. But what the application from a civil site standpoint involves right now is really retaining the existing building shell, which is left right now, I believe, is 14,700 square feet of building. And that existing footprint that is shown on the existing site plan would be retained in its full capacity. There are some additional structures. There's a craneway support, partly roofed, that are being proposed to be retained and potentially worked into some type of site development. And I'll let Fred maybe speak to that a little bit as far as what some of those uses could be. But then really to support the building and any potential use, looking at really formalizing two parking lots, one on the north side, one on the south side, and then redoing some of the municipal utilities, namely the water and the sewer. We have the building currently is on both municipal water and sewer. We'd be looking just to reconstruct those and upgrade them to today's standards, make sure they're viable for whatever potential tenant goes into this space. And really just clean up the site as a whole. Were considerable drainage deficiencies in the property beforehand. And what we're attempting to do is, with a lot of that site redevelopment, is not only treat some stormwater runoff, but also convey it down to the Winooski River in a safe and manageable manner. And I know that was outlined in some of the staff comments, as well as some of the Conservation Committee comments. And again, we can get into some of those in more detail as we go through the night here. But really, the intent of the stormwater design was to not point collect, but really conquer and divide and provide some on-site green stormwater treatment techniques on site before safely conveying it down to the river. And we felt we've accomplished that with the the current stormwater design, understanding that we're out of the threshold of any state discharge or stormwater permit. I guess at this point, I'm happy, Meredith. I don't know if you have the existing and proposed site plan to pull up, or I can certainly screen share them if it's easier. I thought it might make sense to just kind of bring those up so we could take a look at them together briefly.
If you could pull them up, that would be helpful.
Okay, yep. So bear with me. I'm going to just pull up, start with the existing condition here.
Sorry, Jeff. I know usually I'm in a space to be able to do it, but it's a lot of files this time around. Interesting reverse view. Black.
With that being said, I also thought it may be easier. Is it easier in black and white, or is the color?
I don't even know. That's a little. because we're also having there, I can look at on my computer screen, but everybody else is looking, or at least.
Lots. So I'm just going to switch over to the proposed site plan. You kind of see what the site development looks like. Really, it's just a formalization of this. So we've got 39 parking spaces on the northwest side of the proposed building, with the main entrance being right here on kind of northwest side. And then there'd be a secondary parking lot on the southeast side of the building that would have a couple different access points on the southeast side. The loading dock area would be here on the far east corner of the building, with the concept of trucks pulling down Granite Shed Lane and simply backing into this space before utilizing the southern parking lot to do a 3-point turn and exit back down Granite Shed Lane, as it's a one-way dead-end road. And the municipal water and sewer services that are located on the north corner of the building are the locations where we'd be looking to upgrade the water and sewer services. And then, we're obviously proposing a significant amount of landscaping on the property, both on the north and south property lines, to provide some aesthetic screening of these to the adjacent neighbors to the southeast and northwest, as well as some street trees along the front. We have the space capacity to do it. And I know we'll get more into that requirement specifically as we go through the staff notes later on. But, that's the general layout in a nutshell. Nothing's really changing with the building, really just formalizing the parking areas and then doing some utility upgrades. One last thing I will mention with regards to stormwater, how it'll be managed is the whole north parking lot here will all be shallow sheet flowed into a long trail that runs this whole property line along the north or northwest side. So it'll be a shallow, gradual, infiltrative swale with overflow discharging through a small stone swale down the riverbank here, which is one of the two areas that required us to impact those 30% slopes and have the Conservation Committee review it. And then the secondary is the south parking lot here will, because of grade issues and not being able to sheet flow and drain everything to this far south end, we do have a small collection system, a catch basin and underground collection system that would discharge to a stone dispersion swale or outlet right here. And so that's the second location of 30% slope that would need to be impacted. And these have been sized and minimized to all ability to minimize impact within the riparian buffer in the steep bank areas, while still we feel providing a safe conveyance for the stormwater out to the river. And then the last part of this parking lot here would actually sheet flow and be treated with a disconnection area, as this is all predominantly lawn on this far south corner of the building. Creates a brief overview of the existing proposed condition site plan. I guess, Meredith, at this point, I'll maybe stop screen sharing and hand it back over to you. And I don't know if you want to, at this point, go through the staff notes in any particular order or run through them if you want us to lead that discussion, or if you want to lead discussion, happy to proceed however way the board prefers.
Yeah, I think we can, unless board members have any questions right off, basically just clarifying the previous presentation, we can jump into the staff report here.
I don't see any hands, so I think you can
Alrighty,
jump
perfect.
in, Rob.
So it is the first issue in the staff report, and since we have the couple members of the Conservation Commission here, I think the first issue it makes sense to sort of talk about is starting on page 7 of the staff report. We have the water setback area. So do you want to give just a brief little
tutorial
on the water setback as related to this application, Meredith?
Yeah, a little reminder for board members that all properties that have waters, streams, rivers flowing across them in Montpelier, where they've been recognized on our natural resources inventory map, have water setbacks. And depending on what zoning district you're in, that setback area varies. And there's this property is within the riverfront district, so that setback, the water setback, is 20 feet. that's measured from the top of the bank of the river. The first 10 feet of that water setback is referred to as a riparian buffer. So from the top of the bank in towards the building for 10 feet or into the property for 10 feet, there's a riparian buffer that has even greater limitations on what you can do in it. And one of those limitations is that the regulations really want those first 10 feet to, if at all possible, be kept to natural woody vegetation, except in very limited circumstances. And some of those circumstances are for water dependent uses, and other related items. The board has previously approved stormwater outfalls, drainage, things like this to the river in those riparian buffers. It really makes sense because then you're not having water discharged and erode a long way. You also don't have a direct pipe, right? It actually slows down the water discharge a little bit. So previously, we have considered these stormwater outfalls to basically be water dependent structures or uses, even though it's not a boat access or swimming access or something like that. But we do need the Conservation Commission's comments anytime that someone wants to remove woody vegetation from that riparian buffer zone. And so I forwarded the application.
Stored on the riparian area. I would strongly encourage that. It would help a lot with water running off the parking, especially the southeast parking lot that basically has a 1990s storm drain system that collects water in catch basins and runs it directly into the river, which is not the best way to do it. But if there were a woody area over there that could capture some of the water that is going to sheet flow off of that parking lot into the grassy area, that would help. And it would also help hold the bank and contain some of the stormwater. And then the other major part of the proposal was to do some additional green stormwater infrastructure, as much as you can do given the contaminated nature of the soil underneath the site, to put some more green stormwater infrastructure in the swale on the northwest side, that would slow the water and filter it even further, because otherwise, if it's just grass, the water's not really going to infiltrate very well. So if you had some more vegetation, possibly some shrubs, there are people in town who can tell you what some of the good plants are to put in there. To plant some more in that swale to slow and filter the water running off, since you are sheet flowing that whole northwest parking lot into that swale, which is better than running it directly into the river. Thank you. But it doesn't filter it or infiltrate it in a grassy area. So that would be a recommendation. Another recommendation we have, definitely limit removing woody vegetation in the riparian area. And frankly, I don't think you're going to find much, but restore any vegetation that's disturbed during construction. Perhaps thinking about planting clover instead of grasses in the southeast corner there in particular, and the grassy area behind the parking lot. It would probably improve filtration in that area. Check for the presence of invasive species on the riparian buffer, and perhaps develop a plan to remove some of them and plant native species over time. It would improve the health of the bank and the health of the water. I don't know about commercial uses on this, but when I J-lated a footing drain into the Otter Creek about 15 years ago, it had to daylight somewhere between 25 and 50 feet away from the water. And so I would confirm the legal requirement of daylighting the drains directly into the river. And also verified that your fertilizer isn't going to impact the water quality. And there was, perhaps have somebody help you determine plants to put in the swale. And all those are going to make a difference in the stormwater, in the quality of the stormwater, because as we noted in the beginning, water running off a parking lot, even though the impervious surface is the same area as the building that was there, water running off a parking lot is far more polluted than water running off a roof. I think that's, can you think of anything else, Phyllis?
I think you covered it all, Paige. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So
If I can ask the chair, I'd just like to respond.
yes, absolutely. Jeff, go ahead.
It's Fred Connor.
Oh,
Jeff and I have reviewed the Conservation Commission's letter. We appreciate that they met on the topic. We forwarded that letter to our landscape architect. And jumping ahead a bit, assuming we're not going to be in a position to get a favorable decision tonight due to timing and some other information issues that we have, since we got, and we appreciate greatly Meredith's efforts as well, but we received the Conservation Commission letter this morning and we received the staff report while we were moving snow around on Friday. So I think we're going to be requesting a continuance to your next meeting, which I understand to be March 7th. And during that time, we would give a thoughtful reply to both the Conservation Commission and the staff report.
I think the 21st is going to be.
So Fred, right now at the bottom of our agenda, it said that the meeting on the 22nd of this month is canceled, but that was because there's no applications. So if you thought you would be ready by February 22nd, we can continue this to then and meet then, or you could opt to go into March. I think that's really your, whatever you felt you would be ready for.
We can certainly make that timeline and would appreciate the earlier date, please.
Yeah, I mean, that was only canceled because we didn't have any new applications.
I don't think we're going to get through this voluminous everything tonight anyway, so that would work well.
I think if we can get a sort of a general outline as to what the plan is and what the issues are,
Yep.
that would be a realistic goal for this
Perfect
for this hearing.
Well, let's keep moving along here.
So did you, Fred, do you have thoughts specifically about the riparian discussion, or do you want to?
I just give a very brief bit of context. Part of our emergency repairs to the building was a completely new roof system, but we also had to eliminate the post and beam framing on the east end of the building near the river on the whole first floor, and jack up the building and replace concrete and timber framing because that's the place where the 10-foot diameter saw that's fed with water would run every night for 75 years, and those post and beam members were just about dust. So they were staying up by habit. So that's the kind of work that we had to do there. We also demolished a 14-foot deep addition that is not coming back, so we're increasing the green space on that end of the building. It was about 14 by 60, I believe.
Okay.
And Fred, if I could just piggyback on those comments a little more, and this is kind of just address some specific comments, Meredith, within the staff report, but I think at one point you were looking for some confirmation on some numbers with regards to the existing proposed riparian buffer impacts. And I just want to confirm, ultimately what we're proposing is 145 square feet of riparian buffer impact, but that is not within the first 10 feet of the water setback, so it's outside. So there's really no proposed impact in that first 10 feet. And the only additional existing impact, there's about 534 square feet of craneway roof that is within that 20-foot river setback. But again, that's existing a condition. And then on top of that, and I think this kind of is what Fred was just alluding to, is what a portion of the existing building to the southwest that was previously administratively approved and was removed. And that was about 570 square feet in total, of which 442 square feet was within the riparian buffer and has since been removed and returned to green space. So there already have been some mitigation efforts within the previous administrative approval, take back some of that riparian buffer in that space above the top of the bank there. And along those same lines, with regards to Conservation Committee's comments, we did forward those to the landscape architect who designed and developed the landscaping plans. He was gracious enough to provide us with a response, and I think we didn't really have time to turn around that and provide it tonight, but I think there are some thoughtful ways for us to address those comments and concerns with some supplemental revised plans, landscaping plans, that'll hopefully address a lot of the Conservation Committee's comments as we move forward here.
So Jeff, just a couple things. Well, I guess, do you think at the next meeting, maybe you could have a little tiny exhibit showing like your square footage and your impacts, just to, so we have a picture of where that is? Doesn't need to be fancy, but just so we have a general idea.
So like a Zoom.
Yeah. So the second one is, you said 534 feet of the frameway roof. So you're saying that's like the roofed building overhanging into the setback area.
Correct. Yeah. So if you were to go to the proposed condition site plan, or or really either of the site plans, the existing or proposed conditions, you'll see the river top of bank setback established on there, and you can see the portion of the craneway roof that is within that riparian buffer, or that river setback. It's
collected off that roof, or is it just sheet off the edge of it for as we speak, or proposed, or?
As of right now, I believe they both just sheet flow. That there's no collection system to the craneway structure, correct, Fred?
That's correct. And I just want to add, I believe that the roof on that piece of the site terminates before the wetland area. But I'm just gonna look at the site plan behind me right now.
Yeah, Jeff, when we get your revised data, I think it probably, for looking at the nonconformity within the riparian buffer, that Paige did confirm, and I didn't mention it in the staff report. There's lots of stuff going on here. How much of the craneway roof is in the water setback as a whole, right? So that's the 20 foot versus some of that looks like it actually does intrude maybe into the riparian buffer area, that first 10 feet. When we were talking about what's in the riparian buffer before, I was thinking about the new impervious surfaces, right? And those are really just the outfalls, because the stretch of pavement doesn't get into the riparian buffer. That was stayed in the water setback, but
yep.
Is right that the part of that craneway roof looks like it is into the riparian buffer. So if we could have that breakdown on the separation there for the total square footage, that would be great.
Yeah, and I can summarize it, but essentially the craneway, there's 534 square feet of craneway in the river setback, and 200 square feet of that is within the riparian buffer.
Perfect, thank you.
No, Meredith, just for context here, are there any sort of river corridor or floodplain stuff done administratively on this project?
Only the approval to demolish the part where Fred was talking about was the shed.
Yeah.
Right, and that was also lower. That was in the floodplain
Yep.
river corridor, and so Audra was part of getting a permit to get that demolished and pulled out, and none of the rest of the structures fall into there. And there's the line for that is on the site plan.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Can I just say that we do appreciate what Connors have done along the riverbank, and also the fact that they're restoring a historic structure. I think it's great, and I should have said that in the first place. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I mean, so the next item on the staff report is the steep slopes here, which I think you kind of covered it in your presentation, but just maybe to confirm, the only site work proposed in those steep slopes appears to be your construction of these outlets, and not really any grading beyond that, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, that's correct. I mean, again, just with the nature of the stormwater collection and discharge here, and understanding we do have a steep bank I think in total, the elevation change from say the ordinary high water level to the top of bank is somewhere in the neighborhood of say 8 to 10 feet. We're really trying to be cognizant and aware of not creating any type of discharge at the top of these banks that would cause potential erosion of the banks and ultimately compromise any portion of the property. So, what we're proposing from a stormwater management standpoint, we feel is kind of the bare minimum impact on these slopes necessary to safely convey the water in either location. So again, on the north side, we're simply proposing a small swale, stone swale from the top of the bank to the bottom bank, with the total area of that being about 75 square feet. And then on the south side, just all that would be necessary to essentially trench and install that stormwater pipe outlet, and then have a stone dispersion pad at the bottom or the end of that outlet pipe that's about 20 square feet. So really, the limits of disturbance are outlined in the EPSC plans, but we're doing everything we can to minimize that bank, and then obviously we'd be reestablishing the bank and stabilizing it as part of the reconstruction process. Along those same lines, we're also we've got 3 different kind of discharges to the river here in an attempt to not all centralize and collect into one pipe in one discharge location as part of these green stormwater infrastructure techniques. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, and just using best engineering practice in an attempt to allow the site to drain properly, which it doesn't always do now, and B, do it in a manner that compromise the water quality or the bank itself.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. So as far as steep slopes or the river or drainage and erosion, the board members have any questions while we're here? I think
I'm moving along.
Move it along.
Yeah. There's some, the sections here in the staff report about drainage, and I think you've done a really good job of explaining it all so far. So I think we can move on here. And the next section, following along, we're on page 12, and it's access and circulation. I think that this is a good segue into looking at the proposed uses. So maybe I would have you sort of skip ahead and talk about the potential uses here and maybe give us some more information on that.
I'm sorry, you're talking to me or Meredith? I apologize.
I think coming from the applicant as far as proposed uses would be.
Yeah.
I'd to weigh in on that. We think highest and best use could be a brewery and a riverfront restaurant. We've toured the site with a couple of brewers. They both want to stay where they are, but we think there is the potential for that. We're not married to it, but we're exploring a lot of other potential uses as well. But that's a use that could have some appeal and interest by the community, I believe.
Yeah. And Fred, just as far as the application is concerned, outlined, obviously we're applying for several permitted and conditional uses, and those were page 2 of the cover letter that went in with the application originally on December 23rd. But I think as it relates to the conditional use review, as Meredith outlined at the beginning of this, the approach we took not only in the original application as well as our technical review committee discussions was really to take a look at all these different conditional use criteria and then kind of come up with what's the worst case scenario with regards to a potential use for each different criteria, so to speak. I think obviously there's parking to consider, there's traffic to consider. And I think those are the 2 primary ones. I think that ultimately need to be hashed out a little bit here, but in general, as part of our review with the technical review committee, we talked about trip generation and uses. I think, Fred, correct me if I'm wrong, but the concept would be any type of brewery / restaurant would be for about 4,700 square feet of this building to be used, that use and storefront, so to speak, with the remaining 10,000 being used for the manufacturing and production and storage of the beer or restaurant component of it. And so we've kind of taken that breakdown because it's two easy numbers to work with, and kind of run through the parking analysis and traffic analysis on those. Again, understanding we're dealing in hypotheticals here a little bit, but I think and again, I don't know if we want to rehash specifics right now, but that was a lot of the discussion that happened at the technical review committee, and I think the thresholds that Meredith put in place within the staff comments that I think, and again, Fred, correct me if I'm wrong, that we were comfortable with working with or adhering to if a positive outcome on the overall application could be seen. So
yeah, we understand from the staff report that basically we're free to request up to 49 trips per day, but that if we come in with something greater than that will be subject to the zoning administrator's review. And those break down to be 50 because we're on Granite Street, 75 if we're on more of a different class road.
Just before we get too much into the traffic and the trip counts, I just wanted to sort of overview on the uses. So in your cover letter, your application, you list, for permitted uses, retail sales and service for the indoor, office, restaurant, takeout, food service contractor, laboratory or technical facility. And then for conditional uses, be contractor's yard, with or without storage, light manufacturing, warehouse or storage, wholesale, trade, establishment. So are those still in line with what you're proposing?
I believe after discussions with Meredith, my letter of January 11th revises that list.
Yes.
It reduces the number of uses.
Yeah, so because we had there was a lot of back and forth before we triggered the complete application.
Yep.
So that all those things listed in the original cover letter, those are uses that could happen there.
Right.
Either administratively approved or conditional uses. But yeah, as Fred said, the pare down for this application went down to requesting up to 4,700 feet of restaurant, which could be in, eat in or take out, and food service contractor. And those three could really be all approved, overlapping, because those uses could all happen in the same space, almost at the same time. And then up to the 14,700, which is the entire space of manufacturing or warehouse or storage, right? And those are uses that we have in the use table. It specifically just says manufacturing.
Right.
But manufacturing can be a bunch of different things, which is where it gets complicated.
Absolutely.
I just want to add to that manufacturing includes the use brewery.
Yes.
And this was previously, I believe, an industrially zoned parcel. So for 75 years with this building and another 50 with other buildings, it was these uses, manufacturing and warehouse.
Yeah. It's unfortunately you weren't ready to apply for a use within the first 11 months of owning it and after the previous tenants left.
Got it.
Gene has his hand up.
Go ahead, Gene.
Thanks. So regarding uses and considerations to uses, has there been any consideration or discussion to not necessarily just a use for commercial, but is it the potential or consideration for housing? I have to ask that.
The timber frame structure, which if anybody's been in the Vermont Granite Museum, this is a little sister to that building. That one's 300 feet long. This one's 200. That one's a little wider, a little taller. But the framing does not lend itself to residential without a lot of rework. It's not quite tall enough to be two legitimate stories.
I see. I thank you.
Okay. So we talked about the uses here in relation, we're going to do that in relation to, as a primer for access and circulation. I guess this is what asked the question about, you know, you talked about parking on site a little bit, but maybe before getting into that, you know, pedestrian and bicycle access to this site. Obviously, if you're proposing restaurant or brewery, or could be traffic of that nature, proximity to the bike path. Do you have any sort of plans or visions for addressing that aspect of access and circulation?
A project we may want to explore with our neighbors at some point is the reconstruction of the roadway. Each lot, I think there's a half dozen lots, each lot's own the road, and then all the others have the right to pass and repass. So it would be a half dozen folks that would have to agree, or maybe 2 or 3 if it's just on our end, and that would be reconstruction and parking and paving. And we do value our place on the at the start of the new second phase to the Montpelier bike path. So we do want to facilitate that, but right now it's a gravel road and has been for about 150 years.
Did you catch that, Rob?
I did catch that.
You did, okay.
Board members have any questions at this time? Moving down the staff report, we have parking and loading areas. Meredith, were there any technical details we really need to address on this specific issue?
No, I mean, I have a suggestion for a way to, in a condition here, for a way for the board to potentially approve a major site plan with limited parking striping, actual parking spaces striping, that would let the applicant have some parking spaces for a more minimal use of the space, and then be able to come back in sort of a phased adding of parking spaces as they're needed, depending on what the ultimate use is. You know, the only other, you know, one of the other funny little things in here is about the electrical vehicle charging stations. I think that because the language says those are for residents or employees,
yep.
It would depend on what ultimate use ended up being here. So if it did become a big office building with a bunch of employees and they needed 40 parking spaces for those, you know, or more, I think it's more than 40 parking spaces, then suddenly they'd be required to put electrical vehicle charging stations in. But I don't think that the board really has to pull that trigger at this point. I think that's later. So it's really where you guys fall down on putting a condition on approval. I don't think this is a big issue.
So maybe what you're saying is that the specific use hasn't been defined here, so it's hard for us to put conditions on saying exactly what to do because
right. And so I mean, but there is a condition that could be put in to let them strip some parking spaces so it's more manageable and able to be leased out and move forward from there. So that's in there.
A related issue which I had in my letter of January 11th is that we are a brownfield project, so we have an US EPA and Vermont DEC approved corrective action plan, and part of that plan involves building this paving in order to be able to encapsulate very low level waste and save it having to be exported. So
yeah, so they need to pave the surfaces, but they can just hold off on striping all the parking spaces. That also gives them some flexibility if they end up with a use that needs some more truck parking on the other side, or if ultimately they do come back for a contractor's yard approval, they'll have that open paved space to do some add outdoor storage if they need it, but it gives them flexibility.
Right.
Meredith, just a quick confirmation too. I had a note here on page 19. You specifically just asked the applicant to confirm the square footage total in the 2 parking lots, as I think as it relates to maybe landscaping and tree shading. And I just want to let you know, we have confirmed that the total parking lot size at 23,300 square feet, which again, at the 40% is 9,320 square feet, which is less than what's being proposed by a substantial amount, I believe. So just as a clarification on that, on page 19 comment, I think we meet that criteria as proposed.
Thank you. Just to confirm, you said the parking lot total square footage is 23,300 and 40% of that is 9,320?
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
And any of the calculations that Jeff's reciting will obviously put in our reply to the staff report.
Okay. Well, that appears to sort of clear up the major site plan issues in this application. No?
Street trees.
Street trees.
I took care of the shade trees for the parking lot. There's still the street tree question.
We'd like to have the opportunity to review that with our landscape architect and go over the comments, just to save time tonight.
Okay.
And the same thing in the case of the next item, the lighting. We think we can develop a program for meeting the lighting of allowed lumens, but we'd like to save everybody some time and let the professional lighting folks look at that and see how we could get that in compliance.
Hey, Fred, I don't mean to overstep. Could I just maybe ask a follow-up question to that, though? Specifically the street trees. I know we want an opportunity to talk to Terry about it a little bit.
Yep.
But it's my understanding in our conversation today that we obviously have a hard time meeting that requirement given the existing lot layout and the orientation of Granite Shed Lane to the existing building and the parking lots. If we were going to request that waiver, I feel like we want that on the table now, or do you feel differently about that?
No, I think we will we will formally request a waiver. I just want to look at it in more detail. The Roadway comes right up against our building. So yeah. there is no frontage in front of the building to put any plantings. We've put them where we could, and we can't put them on the south side because that's truck access area. So.
Oh, right. Right. The truck's going to need to be able to back in there and have the view.
Correct.
Maybe at the February 22nd meeting, we can address landscaping and lighting with sort of some new information and new plans, and you guys can work on that.
Yeah. And I just had one other item I wanted to get in, which is we were pleased to report that we do have a certificate of public good for a solar array on the south side of the main roof. The roof was designed to accept that, and it's a 66 kW system that's been approved and ready to go. We would expect to have to work on that with the tenant because the tenant's going to be buying the electricity.
Awesome.
Great. Kevin, you have any advice on process here, where we're at?
Well, I would just poll all the members, continue the meeting until the next one, which is the 22nd, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Board members, get Kevin's recommendation here. Do you hear him?
I'm seeing Abby nod.
Yeah.
It's the 22nd of February.
Yep, it's a Tuesday because the city hall is closed on the 21st.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep, and you would be the only item on the for you guys.
Okay. Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, I think that segue, I kind of feel like with this process, we've kind of sort of almost gone through like a sketch plan here. If this were a subdivision, and we have a real good idea on what you're up to, what your next steps are, and I don't think we see any, glaring issues here. You seem to be on top of the major things, and we really look forward to, seeing the rest of it in a couple weeks.
I do have a question. Meredith, has
Here's the microphone so they can hear you.
has Public Works had a look at this?
Oh yeah, we had a full technical review committee review with multiple members of public review, Department of Public Works being there. We had the chief of police, we had the fire chief.
Okay, so the full thing.
We had the full thing with the applicants represented there.
Was there a report that?
So there's a email that's attached in here. It's kind of buried in there. That's a summary that I circulated to everybody to make sure that they had no other comments. And I've tried to work it into the staff report. The only big question for Public Works really was the traffic impact, because it's hard to tell what that's going to be if we don't know what the use is. And the further complication that traffic numbers throughout the state, that in Montpelier, traffic is down probably still 5% or so from where it was 2 years ago. But so really what we have to look at is the trip generation triggers that we have in the regulation. And it's, but again, it's speculative based on what the use is. So that traffic review under conditional use is probably the most complicated part of this.
Yeah.
You know, that and what other.
That design.
Yeah, and again, obviously we're almost in the same boat. It's hard to buy without knowing what the final end use is, but we were trying to kind of into some square footage use components to the building based on the numbers to trigger a traffic impact study for class 1 or 2 roads. And I believe the city of Montpelier for class 2 roads has essentially a trigger of 50 PM peak trips. And so we were essentially during that technical review committee kind of talking through like, well, what could we propose, or what percentages of the building we could propose for different uses that would get us under that threshold, where theoretically it's something where Meredith could process that administratively, or at least have a condition of approval within this conditional use review, where if whatever the IT trip generation manual said, based on the square footage and the ultimate uses of the building, if it fell at 49 or lower, then traffic would essentially be considered a non-issue. Whereas if it went over that and above it, you still may be able to permit it, but it would involve coming back for additional conditional review with the DRB. And that's kind of how we left it. And I think that's kind of, which it's just,
I guess, knowing that part of town pretty well, I guess the interaction between, any proposed site improvements and traffic and the Granite Street Bridge and the interaction with co-op traffic, are things to consider. I think that probably have a fleshed out plan at the end. It's going to address the concerns there, but second by Gene. Kevin, how do you vote? I vote yes. Michael?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Abby?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
And Gene?
Yes.
And Rob votes yes. It's unanimously approved. We have adjourned this meeting, I guess.
Well, we've the public part of the meeting can be closed, right?
Yes.
We would actually like the public hearing to be continued to.
Right. Yep. No, the public hearing has just been continued. That's been voted on. We're talking about the public meeting because these guys have to go to deliberative session on the appeal that you heard earlier.
So
they don't get to sign off all the way yet.
The fun never ends.
As far as the Granite Shed Lane application goes, we will see you all on the 22nd of February.
Thank you very much. And when would you like our materials by?
If let's see, the 22nd, we're closed on the 21st. Sorry, I'm looking at a calendar that's a long way away. I mean, if we can get them
17.
Well, at the latest, I'd really need them by the 17th, but feel free to run things by me ahead of time. So that, because I'm happy to look at things and double check things against the regulations. But yeah, the last date really, so that we can get them processed and pulled together into a packet and then circulated, would probably be the 17th.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. That would also, if we have some, we can get it posted on the website so that if the Conservation Commission wants to look at it again, or at least the members that were on tonight, they could always come back. The commission itself wouldn't be able to meet again, but individual members could always take a peek at it and comment as members of the public. So thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I will circulate the link for the deliberative session to the DRB members and to Mike. I cannot be part of the deliberative session. So there'll be another reshuffling of people.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Motion to adjourn the public meeting. Hearing.
Seconded.